Hi all, welcome back to another lecture. Today we are talking about intelligent agents. So basically the technology behind intelligent assistants like chatbots, systems like Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa, and so on. So I will, a bit similar to the first lecture, give you a brief introduction, and then we look in detail in different implementation technologies for writing these chatbots. As a side note, this lecture is also somewhat special in that 1 year ago, this was the very last lecture I gave in a classroom as a normal lecture. And well, I'm not sure how these things will look like in 1 year from now. So let's talk about chatbots, or more formally, intelligent conversational agents, also known as dialogue systems or dialogue engines. So I already told you in the first lecture that here we're looking at programs, at software that can interpret and respond to statements that users make to it in natural language. And I showed you this diagram of different categories of bots. So one distinction was, is it an open domain or a closed domain bot? Is it something that only talks about your bank account or your flight reservation? Or is it a bot that you can talk about pretty much anything? And responses here were classified into basically retrieval-based. So you retrieve existing answers, or generative-based, where you really generate new content. So I mentioned that overall, the existing bots today have a similar architecture, but of course, the concrete software stack behind it differs on how you implement it. So you have some kind of integration with other messaging systems. You integrate with various various applications like Slack, various messenger system like Facebook Messenger, Google Messenger, WhatsApp, Line, and so on, and possibly other applications like Zoom or Skype or email integration and so on. So this is the integration layer. Then you need some kind of natural language processing. This can be very simple pattern matching or a lot more sophisticated deep analysis. And we'll talk about more about natural language processing in the upcoming lectures. And then it needs some way to retrieve the answers. This can again be different depending on the technology. We'll see systems that use knowledge graphs, but you could also have a simple database of questions and answers. And again, depending on how sophisticated the bot is, it has possibly a data store on the one side for memorizing interactions with the user. So when you go to the same bot again with your account, it remembers your name and also has access to other information about you. So in the first lecture, I also showed you that bots have a long history in AI going back to the 1960s with ELIZA, and later bots greatly improved on the techniques used by ELIZA, but probably the biggest shift where they became the industry breakthrough that they have now was with the Siri application. So Siri, you know, of course, from Apple and the iPhone, but it wasn't developed at Apple. That was a startup that was later bought by Apple, and then it became very well known when Apple integrated it as an iPhone application. So as a side note, there is a nice presentation back from around 2010 or so, I don't know the exact date, but around that time when it was first released, one of the key people behind it, Tom Gruber, introduced Siri, how it works and what made it so special. It's quite long, but you should look at least at a couple of minutes, see how it's introduced, what the changes are, and yeah, look around the video a little bit. It's very interesting. So one of the major changes was that before in AI, all these chatbots are mostly used for research and entertainment purposes. For example, for competitions where you try to fool others into thinking the bot is a human. There's this Turing competition, Turing Award, and various other online competitions where bots just try to pretend they're a human. So they were interesting both from a research perspective and from an entertainment perspective, but they weren't really terribly useful for doing anything. And one of the major changes that Siri made popular is how to show how a bot can actually do something useful. So it introduced, or rather it popularized the idea of having task-specific models and services. So now it can actually do something for you. It can send an alarm, it can read an email out loud, or it can write a message for you. So basically it has an extendable list of plugins that connect with other applications. It can use all the resources it has available on the phone, such like information about you, your address book, your location, your calendar, your events, and then it can use all of this information to do something useful. For example, booking a ticket, finding a route, looking up restaurants near you, opening hours, and so on. So that was probably the starting point of the modern era of bots. So I also showed you in the first lecture this huge collection of different providers. Essentially what you had here was in the middle again, the connecting services for bots. You connect with chat or other applications. You have the various tools that you use for implementing them. And you have the service providers that can build bots for a company using these various technologies. And then you have the different users of the technology. So in industry, it's important to know for what exactly you want to use the bot, for what kind of application. After this lecture, you'll probably understand a bit better why this is such a mess, why there are dozens, if not hundreds, of libraries and startup companies that make bots for different purposes. But it has to do with different ways of implementing bots. So there are at least 4 different major ways. And for each of them, you can have different libraries and tools, so that multiplies all of these implementation choices. So what are these 4 different approaches? The first one that you've seen with ELIZA is the idea of pattern matching. So you match the input against a set of patterns, and then when the pattern matched, you generate a response. So there can be some variables in there, as you've seen. It's not a completely static response, but still it can only answer to questions it matches and can only provide answers that exist in the templates. Another technique is based on grounding, and grounding means that you're trying to ground the conversation in real-world knowledge. So here, this means using knowledge graphs and doing some kind of search and inference on these graphs. Search-based bot use techniques from information retrieval. So this goes back to what we've just covered in previous weeks. And generative, we are not going to cover in this lecture. We're going to look at them in later lectures. So these are the ones that generate new answers, and the modern ones use this with deep learning techniques. So obviously, you're not limited to writing a bot with just one of these techniques. A lot of the bots that are used in practice combine 2, 3, or even all 4 of these techniques to do something useful, engage with the user, and appear to be smart. So using these different techniques, the bots have been used for all kinds of applications. So a common one is question answering. And this is what you see with the modern bots like Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri, and so on. And in virtual assistants, basically the difference is that you want your bot to be able to do something useful as well. So for example, setting an alarm, putting something on your shopping list, and so on. So the difference here in question answering is that they just give you a factual answer about something you want to know, like where is Concordia University located, versus the virtual assistant are those bots that can do a certain task. For example, you could ask a Concordia bot to please register me for this course next term. Conversational bots are the ones that are more for, well, typically for entertainment. Yeah, the old ones like Eliza, they simulate a conversation with a user, but nowadays there are also more serious applications of it. For example, the ones that are coming here further below, the therapy bots. Marketing bots are a big category nowadays. So these are bots that announce, market, talk about a new product or a new service online. So very often nowadays, when a company releases a new product, a video game or a movie, then there is a corresponding bot that talks about it on Facebook, on Twitter, and on other online media. A big commercial category are these customer service bots, because they work for you 24 hours a day. They can be the first line to talk to a customer about technical service issues, answer questions about products in an e-commerce storefront. So nowadays, you see these coming up more and more on all kinds of websites. Pretty much everyone wants to have a bot. They differ a lot in how sophisticated they are. The simplest one aren't really bots. They're just like a menu system. Press 1 for doing this, press 2 for doing that. So these are not really the kind of bots that we talk about here. But they are becoming, as a general line, more and more sophisticated everywhere. There are bots that use to shepherd online communities. If you have a large online forum, you know this can easily get off the rails when people start posting not so nice things about each other. So bots can be used to identify hurtful messages, engage the users, and generally try to steer a conversation into topical and productive areas. The therapy bots, they go back to the very first bot, Eliza. Eliza was not really meant as a serious bot for helping people as a psychotherapist, but nowadays there are more and more bots that try to actually help users in various with various issues they have. And one example, Wobot, again, is not very sophisticated in the sense of natural language processing, but you can see it has very cleverly constructed pattern response templates. I think, I'm not sure right now, but I think it came from Facebook Messenger originally, but it's available as a standalone app. So try it out. You can see that it doesn't really, except for very few cases, it doesn't really analyze what you are saying, but it has a clever way of using templates and a steered conversation to help users. And if you look at online testimonials, you can see that a lot of people like interacting with a bot like this, and it's actually helpful in certain scenarios. So now we looked at 4 major technologies for how to implement bots and a whole range of different application areas, conversation, marketing, customer service, and so on. And again, you can see that there is not a one-to-one relationship. You can use for one area multiple of these techniques. Pattern matching as the simplest and oldest technique you can apply basically everywhere. And often it's a very good first testing strategy or fallback strategy to employ in any of these bots. Today, we'll talk more about grounding and search. And again, generative systems, they're a bit more limited in what you can use them for. It's mostly for conversational agent nowadays. And how they work in detail will come to in the next couple of weeks. So inside those bots, you often combine multiple techniques, and you have to have some way of memorizing information about the user. So in modern sophisticated bots, you have kind of a feedback pipeline. So here's the overall workflow, how it can look like. You have text coming in. Again, I mentioned here in this course, we only deal with textual input. When you want to have spoken input, basically there is an additional speech-to-text translation step. There are other libraries for doing that. And then you just work with the text that's coming in. So first you have to analyze the text. This can be a simple pattern matching using regular expression, or it can be a different technique like vectorization, like we have done with TF-IDF vectors, or it can be a natural language processing step. Then we have our input as a kind of feature vector in possible different format. We do a further kind of analysis on it. We try to generate some answers for it. Again, depending on the technique that we have, could be a search in a knowledge graph, it could be template generation and so on. You could have even multiple of these techniques applied in parallel, and each of them would generate a response. And then you can try to compare the different response candidates against the input question and try to score them and try to find out which one could be the best of those. And then depending on the score that you give for the different answer candidates with the input, you would decide to execute and select one of them. Then update all the internal state. Again, if you have a task-based bot, it might have to do something like setting an alarm, and it has to make sure that it remembers what it did, and it can generate the response for the user. So I mentioned marketing chatbots. So there are tons of these out there. Again, nowadays, most media companies develop a bot specifically for advertising their new TV show, the new movie, the new video game, and so on. And well, these bots are quite busy. For example, the bot announcing Call of Duty posted 6 million bot messages in, I don't know, a couple of days or so. So you can see they, even though you have to develop them specifically for a product, they make up for it in volume. As another example, I mentioned bots that answer questions. So one application area is in companies, for example, in human resources interaction, when you have what's called onboarding of a new employee. And very often the new employees have the same type of question when they come. They ask about their insurance, about vacation days, about how to set up various accounts and so on. And if you have a large international distributed company, that's a lot of work for a human to answer. So there is a lot of basic questions that you can give the bot to do, and then only the human has to only contact a human resource specialist for answers that are not covered by the bot. So this is a very nice, insightful video. have a look at this one. It's just 2 minutes long, and it's from this startup company, Lina. So this is a startup that went through an incubator. If you know about startups, you know the Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. If you don't, you should probably look it up if you want to know what's happening in the area of tech. So this is one of these startup companies that graduated in this accelerator, the Y Combinator. And this being the most famous and biggest, if they graduate, they are almost guaranteed to have a large multi-million round of investments. So basically you come with your startup idea, you go through a couple of rounds, you demo your system, you develop it, you have various challenges. And then at the end, if you graduate, the various investors are going to look at them and invest seed capital. So this was one of these startups, that was very successful a few years back and had a large initial round of investment. So again, have a look at the video to see why this is interesting for companies and why there has been so much investment in chatbot technology in the last couple of years. Of course, there are lots of other interesting applications. Another one that was in the use some time back was this chatbot that could help you to overturn parking tickets. And it worked in London and New York. So there was this bot, you just had to talk to it, and then it could help you to contest a parking ticket. And it was made available for free. And in just 21 months, it helped to appeal more than $4 million in parking tickets. And this bot was written by a 19-year-old. So no excuse for not writing code in the lab, right? So I mentioned in the first lecture that chatbots are seen one of the major emerging technologies. So this really started out a few years back that the major consulting companies announced this as a technology to invest in. And this is still growing. So there's still a multi-billion-dollar interest with a large growth area. So the values are, for a company, it can be all across the value chain, meaning from marketing a new product to helping make sales of a new product inside the company, as the example I've shown you on human resources and other areas of operations like IT support and similar, helping with customers with service, payment, customer retention, making sure people don't leave, they don't cancel, you engage them, and also grow the business. And just a few days ago, March 10, there was again in the news, there's a Montreal company, yet another startup, Payday, and they got a second round of investment. So they raised another 6.5 million Canadian dollars in a Series 2 in a second round of investments, again for chatbot development toolkit. Have a look at it online if you're interested. Similarly, relatively new is interest in using bots for higher education. We are doing a little bit of this in the course project, but you can imagine there's a lot more potential in helping individual students, starting from school children to online distance learning education. So having personalized bots that know exactly information about the course, the material, what you know, what you have problems with, what you finished, what you didn't finish, they can deliver personalized help and services. So enough talk from my side for the introduction. There is a simple task on the worksheet. So after going through the videos and the other readings, try coming up with something interesting for task 1. And then we can compare notes on the Moodle online forum. And then I'll see you back in the next part of the lecture.